Greetings and welcome to the Industrial Lens Podcast. Here we examine cutting-edge insider knowledge on industrial equipment, strategy, and trends so that you can thrive and stay ahead of any challenges, seen or unseen. Now, let's get industrial.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Industrial Lens Podcast. My name is Jeremy King, and I am joined today by CEO of Fathom Digital Manufacturing, Rush LaSelle. Sorry about that, Russ. How are you doing today?
Hey, I am doing great, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. We're excited to talk with you. Before we dive into some big trends in manufacturing, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, what led you to Fathom, and also what it is that Fathom does and offers?
Absolutely. So I'm a longtime manufacturing guy, Jeremy. Been in the industry for a little over 30 years now. Hate to confess. Started out here in Denver as an intern doing work in an injection molding shop. So that's how I kind of got started and made my way through. My first phase was in automation, trying to figure out how to make predominantly domestic manufacturers more competitive on what was already becoming a global stage. Then had the fortunate opportunities to move into some world-class manufacturing operations and really understand what operational excellence looks like on the manufacturing floor. And then I'd say in the third phase of my career, have had the opportunity to work with some really exciting new technologies like 3D printing. And most recently landed here at Fathom and really couldn't be more excited for many of the reasons I think we'll talk about here today on your show, which is, manufacturing's had a bit of a challenge, right? If you look at the PMI and some other things, but boy, there's a lot of opportunities if you're talking about the right types of categories of products, right customers, right markets. And so, Fathom's in a wonderful place and I couldn't be more excited to be here representing them.
Awesome. Thanks for that intro. Getting into the topic at hand regarding manufacturing, how do you see the current state of U.S. manufacturing today, and where do you feel it's headed? What role do you see additionally in Fathom playing in help shaping that future of U.S. manufacturing?
Yeah. So as I just mentioned, it depends. If you look at it at a really high level, Jeremy, it's been challenged, right? As just an industry at large. The PMI, for any of your listeners who aren't familiar, it's the Purchasing Managers Index. And if it's above 50, things are going swimmingly. If it's way below 50, it's contracting. And we've been right at 50. So what that tells me is that some folks in some sectors are winning and some are losing. And that's, I think, probably what we see in the news every day. And so let's focus on the winners. There's a lot coming out right now that I think people who are considering being in the industry and companies should be excited about, whether it's DoD spurred, the defense industry, AI enabled with humanoid robotics, and there's still a lot of work going on with electrification, whether it's vehicles, your house, what have you. And so there's a lot of segments where there is a lot of growth and excitement. And then so as I think about how Fathom's participating in that, there's also a shortage of people who have come into the manufacturing industry. And so what that means is, if you got a great idea for a product going into a hyper-growth industry, you may not have the engineering resources, or you may just not have the manufacturing capacity and capability to realize that. And that's really where I'm excited about our team stepping in, so that we can talk to those very companies, whether they're startups or old line OEMs, and build the bridge from your concept, your product, to how do you do it at the requisite level of quality, cost, volume. And that's really that spot that I think Fathom's uniquely positioned to sit in.
Great. Segueing from that, we know that many manufacturers do struggle to jump from prototypes to full-scale production.
Yeah.
Tends to trip up those companies, and how does Fathom Digital Manufacturing make that transition easier?
Yeah, well, it's a really important question. I mean, there's a lot of options and suppliers who do strictly prototyping and do it exceptionally well. But yours is a really important question, because what is produced at a quantity one versus what is produced at a quantity a million are frequently radically different. And that's exactly, I think, the consultative role that we partner in helping people to understand. And let's just take for an example a prototype that we would do in 3D printing. The likelihood is if that company who wants that prototype takes it to scale and is successful in the market, it'll likely move to injection molding because that's just how you get the cost and some of the mechanical properties you might like. And so for us, that's exactly what we talk about. We're like, hey, we can get you the form and the function here. You can do market research. You can do this, that, and the other thing. But we're also really acutely aware of where the limitations are. So you can't do certain sorts of testing. Mechanical properties aren't the same. So what we really try to do is say, hey, we can do this at this phase, at this technical readiness level. But ultimately, let's be aware of where we're going to go and what the costs will look like when we get to the stage you want to launch a product.
Interesting. Can you share an example of where design for manufacturing support or early collaboration with Fathom helped a client successfully bridge that gap?
Sure. Going to have to protect our customers, so I won't mention any names, but let me give you the application that comes to mind when you ask. So additive finds its way into production applications, in a number of different places where you want to pay for the high value of the product, where you get fluidics. So if you've got a lot of complex channels that are really hard to produce other than through additive, I'd say aerospace applications where the surface area and some of the other things. But for us, we had an application in one of those related fields that I just described, where there was a complexity that really could only be produced with additive, but there was a cost target, and there were some other things within an assembly that you could theoretically, Jeremy, have printed the whole thing. But what our engineers helped the partner or customer of ours to understand is, okay, if we do these components with additive, but then we consider maybe some injection molded parts and we do these assemblies, we took a more full BOM perspective of it, and it helped us because first prototype and article was fully 3D printed, but we had a roadmap and an understanding when and where we were going to cut into more of a hybrid manufacturing model. And so I think that's exactly what typifies some of the things that we do from proto to production.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Getting to the trend of the state of manufacturing in the US, what do you see as the biggest factors driving more of a renewed emphasis on American manufacturing right now?
Yeah. So like I said a moment ago, the reality is that it's a mixed bag. There are some industries that either there's just so much demand flowing and there's such an immediacy of need that it doesn't support the timeline to do those sorts of developments over the pond or even near shoring. And you really want somebody partnering with you just down the street. And some of those are, like I mentioned, electrification. One of the places where there's a lot of interaction between manufacturing and design is in humanoid robotics and automation at large, where there's just such a clock speed of iteration that promotes doing things here at home, here in the US. But I think the other thing that the market is getting more astute at coming out of things like COVID, the Suez Canal, the supply chain challenges is that, yes, some things are going to continue to be done not here on US soil, but there are hybrid approaches even to the supply chain. So, if I use my example from a moment ago, maybe some of those components that went into that aerospace application are produced here, and then we bring other components from across the pond in. And, I think that typifies the way we need to think about manufacturing. It's just not one monolithic thing. It's a series of supply chains that gets a product to shelf or, into a complex assembly.
Exactly. Yeah. So reshoring does get a lot of buzz, but in practice, it's complicated because reshoring isn't going to look like 1950 in the United States where manufacturing was. So, what are you actually seeing from your clients? Are they bringing back some entire product lines, or are they just focusing on some critical components that they're manufacturing?
Once again, it depends on the market. There's a couple of things that I think are cues to answer the question. One, what is the quality requirement? Is it regulated? What is the IP sensitivity? Because some of those are the things that would say, okay, if those are really important to our particular product, we're going to put a premium on doing it again closer to us, and that might warrant doing it here in the U.S., which, just because of our labor rates is going to be higher typically. But I would answer the question to say that it's a blend, and I'll give you just maybe another example without citing the customer, but within a healthcare application, the company puts an exceptionally high premium on what we deliver to their assembly, but they don't want to pay for us to do it all here in the Midwest.
Sure.
And so we actually and this is part of what I think, again, is really exciting about Fathom is we can understand how to do that. We can partner and get maybe lower value components, or we can do some early machining processes in lower cost areas, bring it to a site, in the Midwest, do the last mile of production and cutting or what have you. But most importantly, Jeremy, put it through our quality lab so that we get the right certifications and quality to hand it over to that assembly lab. And they go, okay, we got both. We got the quality and we got the costing. And I think that that's just endemic across the industry, that the one size fit all, that's probably what went out with the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah. There are trade-offs to be considered. So that includes cost, speed, talent, compliance, and availability of components here. When companies are deciding between producing overseas or bringing some of it back to the U.S., are there, I guess, any of those factors I listed or others that you see your clients mainly focusing on right now?
Well, I think all of them. I mean, the one thing that you have to appreciate is manufacturing and supply chains have been around for a very long, long time. So the people who are engaging with them have pretty good playbooks. And so everything you just mentioned, and I would just say that, again, my last third of my career has been in and around digital manufacturing and 3D printing.
Yeah.
And the significance of that, Jeremy, is that there it's a very pronounced cost curve to volume. And I share that because that's one of the huge predictors is, if you're going to go to volume, you're going to find the lowest cost solution you ultimately can. Whereas if you're going to do one or two, you can probably tolerate, because of the complexity and the amount of other things that people have to do to get that product out, you can tolerate a little higher cost. So I would start with actually volume typically. Then I'd go to quality requirements and then speed. Those were kind of the three. And then the last one that you really can't overlook, because I know that the Biden administration was really pushing hard on bringing semiconductor back with the CHIP Act and everything else. Then you really have to look at what is the infrastructure, because there's already a lot of infrastructure in Southeast Asia. And then what is the switching cost to bring that home? So there's a lot of factors, but I think you mentioned the primary drivers.
Yeah, we know that well around where we are. We're in Columbus, Ohio. Intel was initially pushing a very large semiconductor manufacturing plant nearby here that's been put on pause a couple times now and getting pushed out, but it's generated a lot of buzz where we are.
It has, and I would just use that as a perfect example. When you ask how's manufacturing doing, there's a lot of folks in the semiconductor supply chain, people who want to put equipment into that site, who they too are on pause now. And so some of this is programmatic, and I just think that's why when you find the right spots, they have to go really fast. And then you have these spots where the challenge is they have the pause button, but if that turns around, boy, people are going to get busy pretty quick.
Yeah, definitely. Are you seeing a lot of I would assume it differs, but in the prototyping that you do for your customers, are you seeing that they're doing the prototyping because you're nearby, and then perhaps they're manufacturing their finished goods overseas or elsewhere? And this is an ease of locality, basically.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't immediately think about it as geography. I mean, I frequently talk with our teams about, hey, it's nice to drive down the street and talk to the engineers, and that is absolutely a nice thing to have. What I think really differentiates, because if we're really transparent, you can get prototype parts from China as well, off some of the very same technology that we operate in Heartland. I think where you're going to have a willingness to pay a little bit more to source it from us than you would to send it over the pond is where maybe you have some questions about, can I hold these sorts of tolerances, and how do these two things go together? Have you seen, and this is something that when I'm talking to our clients, I talk about a lot, is like, I'm sure that you know how to design this particular widget better than anybody on our team. However, what we bring is we've seen people trying to do something similar from a wide body of industries and applications, and we may have seen something that you haven't seen yet. And so that collaboration, Jeremy, I think that's what the significance is for us as we think about prototyping. Is we really want to be early on the new product introduction phase, not just produce a plastic or metal part that is a prototype, but rather say, okay, how does this lead to the form, fit, and function that ultimately you and your customer are going to want?
Great. Okay. Thanks. That's really helpful. Wrapping up on the topic of reshoring. I know that probably a lot of the buzz in 2025 around reshoring has been due to tariffs that we've experienced in the United States. Do you see, but there are other factors, of course, too, just in terms of ease of getting product more quickly, logistics, et cetera. Do you see some of this reshoring as a long-term structural shift in the U.S., or are you seeing that more of a short-term reaction to things we're seeing in the economy, maybe?
Um, I think that it is a factor in structural shifts that have been taking on long before COVID, long before tariffs. These are really just levers and dials being turned in what is and will remain, no matter how protectionistic we want to become as an economy and as a nation. It is a global economy, and it is not going to go back. We're trying in certain industries, and some of them where, once again, if you think about things that the government wants, absolutely, you got to kind of protect that. But I would say that there are cycles within a more structural change, and we saw that. Again, I'm not a manufacturing historian, but if you think about textiles, you think about a lot of things, they find themselves into the right place either by way of natural resource, cost structure, or trade. Nothing's changed over the last 200 years on that front, and tariffs are going to come and go. So I think those are cyclical, but the finding the right location, becoming a more distributed manufacturing in a global economy, that's here to stay.
Okay, great. Switching into some things that Fathom does, you highlight on your website the 7 operating sites and a global sourcing network. Can you break down that system that Fathom has and how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, I think that what makes this company so special and why I'm so excited to be here is that at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is really just solve point level problems, manufacturing problems, maybe some engineering and quality for our customers, and help them figure out how to get to where they want to go. And so we have 7 sites, as you mentioned, and each of those 7 sites, Jeremy, they're really good at doing something. And there's a Venn diagram. Some of them do the same thing as some of our other sites. But where we find something he wants to do to really micro machining, we have a site in Newark, New York, that is just wonderful at that. So what we are trying to do is to, when we have something come inbound, we're trying to find the people who know the most about it and engage at that level first. Okay. Now we've got, depending on how you categorize it, plus 35 plus capabilities within our 4 walls. But that's not everything. So some people come in and say, hey, I need something that looks like, and we don't have that within our 7 sites. That's where our partnership network comes into play, is that we have a group of engineers who say, okay, we can get the expert from our site, or we have some partners. And the way we've structured that, Jeremy, that is, again, because speed is really important. We want to be able to say, we know how to do it. We have a partner that can do it. And most importantly, we can get it back to you and bring it through our network because we can get you the requisite quality. And that's a little bit how that spider web works. But it's really, for us, all about the initial engagement with trying to understand, what is our customer trying to accomplish.
Gotcha. Are there certain industries that you feel need your services more than others, or that turn to you because you fulfill something maybe that they can't get elsewhere? Maybe they're the size and scope typically that, they just aren't capable of handling these kind of things in house.
Yeah, I'd answer your question probably on two dimensions. First is what we talked about a little earlier, which is, some industries are going to be hot, some are not, and therefore, there's going to be demand, there's going to be R&D dollars, and frankly, I think we are set up to satisfy quite a wide body of those. Right now, as I mentioned earlier, some of the hot markets are humanoid robotics.
Yeah.
A&D is really big right now. Healthcare, some of those things that some people will talk about as recession proof. So I think we are really trying to figure out who has need and where the demand signals are. And so we're not trying to be specific to a particular industry. The other dimension I would speak to, Jeremy, is no, we I think are pretty and we're seeing demand from both startups, so small teams that maybe don't have manufacturing expertise. But what I really find fascinating, and this is really more of a demographic discussion, is some of the very large Fortune 500 OEMs, whether they be in automotive, whether people who have been subjected to cycles over the last 10 years may have shed or retired out a lot of engineering and manufacturing expertise. And so we're equally, I think, conversant with those folks to say, okay, you still have your design team, but maybe you don't have a factory anymore, or maybe you don't have that engineering team. And so we can help augment those design, engineering, and quality teams.
Oh, that's really interesting to hear about the range of sizes of and industries as well that utilize your service. Are there certain industries you feel where it's harder to source what they need locally, maybe, or how does, or maybe within the U.S. I don't know if it's a space that Fathom competes in where there aren't a lot of other organizations that can fulfill the various needs that you do. How does Fathom, how does the global network that you have help fill any gaps maybe that they typically have a hard time fulfilling?
Yeah, I would look at it more from an augmentation. There are some companies that arguably are doing better at if you just want to go and you want to get a low cost prototype out of Asia. That's not necessarily what we're here to support. What we're here to support is to first and foremost just say, hey, if there's something that we can help and advise on, because we're not always the lowest cost provider because we believe we're bringing service and value to our customer base. So the way I think about our partner network, once again, is that we just don't have it all under our roofs. We've got 350,000 square feet of manufacturing space. There's quite a bit of domestic space, but we just don't have it all. So it's really an augmentation. It just provides a few more arrows in our quiver, if you will, so that when we're talking to someone, they say, hey, can you do? We're like, well, we can't, but we know somebody. And so that's really how we use that partnership network. It's not for us to try to be the Amazon of manufacturing. In fact, if I took that analogy a little bit further, you can buy a lot of hardware components off of Amazon, but if you don't know how to go fix the sprinkler system, you're probably going to go down to the local hardware store. That's a little bit of how I think about us.
Gotcha. And I guess this is related to it. What I was thinking of to ask next is something I saw on your website was a promise of supplier consolidation. How is that important today, and how does this help reduce risk for your clients?
That one's probably the easiest answer I'll give you of anything. It's reducing the number of people that a procurement manager, supply chain manager, or anybody, frankly, from our customer has to pick up the phone and check in on, right? So, if we're starting and somebody has a assembly that requires a little bit of additive, a little bit of CNC, a little bit of sheet metal, and maybe even a little bit of something that we don't have that we're going to source either domestically, near shore, or outshore. I think the huge convenience is you call us, and we essentially have someone there that's going to run air traffic control for all of that. And because you have that single point, it is, as you said, and this is so very important in manufacturing, Jeremy, as you know, it reduces risk. Reduces risk of cost overrun, reduces risk of schedule slip. and ultimately it reduces risk of receiving a box at the end of the day that has the product that you want with the requisite quality.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Um, that I think that relates to what Fathom talks about in having high touch engineering support. What does white glove service look like in manufacturing, and why does that matter for your clients?
Yeah. So I mean, at the beginning, and I don't mean to belabor, but whether we're talking about design for additive manufacturing and some of the tips and tricks that maybe we saw in healthcare and sharing that with an aerospace customer, the initial engagement point from, hey, is this designed exactly the way you want it to be designed? And then the next stage in that early engagement, Jeremy, is and are you putting quality requirements around here that fit the cost model you're trying to achieve. And that's one that we see quite frequently. We talk about over-constrained quality documents. And so that's a consultation that I think we are pretty uniquely positioned to be able to talk people through, is that they come in and they have drawings that have a thousand call outs, and we're like, well, 1,000 call outs is going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
Should it be 100? What is the design intent? And I think there's a lot of value that we bring there, Jeremy. But then the back end of this conversation, which you asked about earlier in the show here, was what's the difference from that then going to rate production? And I think our team is really good at saying, well, we're not always going to do the rate production for you because we typically live at the front end of the life cycle. We understand what that looks like, and we know the off ramps, or we know how to get you there once we get through the design and prototyping phases.
Okay. With talent being talked about a lot in terms of the prospect of reshoring or reshoring that is happening, going back to my point earlier, manufacturing, as if there's reshoring, isn't going to look like it did 50, 70 years ago. There's going to be more automation involved. Um, what are some of the topics to be aware of or concerns that companies like yours have in attracting talent? Maybe where are you seeing that we need more development in the United States of talent and manufacturing? And then what does Fathom do to attract and retain that engineering and manufacturing expertise to deliver that white glove service?
Awesome. I love the question. Well, let me segue out of the last question. One of the things that's really imperative for us to make our white glove brand promise work is the ability to move information from one person to the next very quickly. And so I was talking about quality and the documentation that surrounds that. And so I'm sure many of your listeners can appreciate that sometimes it's a lot of information. And so for us, there's a digital component. That's why you hear so much here in the last 5, 10 years about digital manufacturing. And I'd say just a slight different. I talk about digitally enabled manufacturing. So our teams, whether they be engineers, project managers, whoever they might be, the digital the digital convergence is taking that information, be able to, yes, put it into digital manufacturing processes like 3D printing, but it's really being able to figure out how to manage all of this information flow quickly. And so then your question now is really about the people who we are trying to retain and attract. Uh, I think for us, it's actually been quite fun because we do a lot of really fun things. I mean, if you are a manufacturing person or somebody who is highly curious, which is usually a predictor for success in manufacturing, and you look at what we do, I mean, what we do, as I said at the outset, we solve problems. And so we bring digital, we bring great tools, we bring a lot of really interesting things to young people, to people who've been in the space for a while, that makes every day a little bit different and a little bit exciting. And that's the feedback I constantly get is people are excited to come in and solve those problems. And then the bigger question is how do we get more people into the industry? But as it relates to Fathom, I mean, those are some of the things that we find that people are excited to come and join us to go and do.
Okay, great. Yeah, we've had some previous conversations with guests and things that I've consumed and read regarding how a lot of internal automation in manufacturing is focused on not eliminating, but basically taking care of some of the low value tasks that people were doing or jobs that they didn't enjoy doing that maybe had high turnover. So there's been more of this focus on kind of high touch, high skill tasks that people are involved in, and ultimately the decision making that puts that into action. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that convergence of more digital and just robotic automation comes into play in manufacturing, and what things are going to look like in the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the thing that I find really fascinating is that in my early career, I mentioned I was in the robotics industry, and we always talked about the three Ds: dirty, dull, and dangerous. And you want to get people out of those roles, and that's what automation has really done over the last, you know, 20, 30 years. AI is doing much of the same, except for more white collar work. It's
Yeah.
getting people out of really repetitive tasks. So all this automation, I think, in my mind, it's an augmentation. It's not a replacement in many cases.
Do you see anything immediate regarding how AI will change the way that teams design, produce, and innovate products ultimately in manufacturing or engineering?
Absolutely. It is so pervasive from our front office all the way to the shipping dock. And I just give you a couple examples. I mean, the easy ones, because we've seen it already coming out of Silicon Valley, is you can use AI, whether it be Chat GPT or any of the other offshoots from large software companies, to just really take and reduce the amount of reporting and repetitive work you do on a PC, right? Things that people need to send to me. I mean, you don't want them spending half hour giving me a report. You like say, hey, I'm gonna go work on this, and here's 5 minutes of effort to tell you what I went and worked on. I mean, that's the obvious one that everybody's really pretty conversant with. But the same thing plays out in our manufacturing floor, where if you think about programming a CNC, there is a lot of work that goes into translating what you either get on a 2D drawing or more frequently, a digital file, and then the last mile of converting to that to something that goes onto a spindle.
Yeah.
Um, what our team does exceptionally well is that last mile where they be a little dramatic, put their hand on the machine and can feel whether it's running the way you would think about a high performance car.
Yeah.
So that's their value add. The value add is not a lot of the setup work digitally, and that's where AI is. We're already seeing it, and it's coming. And I can tell you, those folks that are operating machines,
Yeah,
they don't want to do the mundane work. They want to get out and make the race car run faster.
sure. That makes sense. And that's interesting to see some of the inside of that philosophy.
Lower push and pull force. Reduce fatigue. Prevent injuries. When you choose ergonomically engineered casters, your team feels the difference, and so does your bottom line. Ergonomics isn't a buzzword. It's the future of safe, productive work. Shop online or chat with a caster nerd now at casterconnection.com. We keep your team rolling forward.
All right. Welcome back from break. I'm still here with Rush LaSelle, CEO of Fathom Digital Manufacturing. Russ, one thing I thought of during the break that I wanted to touch on was regarding talent in manufacturing. Are you seeing more people transition to considering manufacturing because of maybe the high cost of traditional college and university in the US or other kinds of roles, maybe considering trade schools now, or any kind of barriers to entry in manufacturing that you're seeing that maybe people aren't aware of, or yeah, where do you see that right now?
Well, let me start with, I think that the latest census said there was something on the order of 600,000 open manufacturing jobs here in the US. So despite any of the challenges I mentioned before break, there's a huge demand. So if you're a young person and you're looking for a good place to go and build a career, that suggests that there's a good starting point. To your question about pathways in and then barriers, there's been a lot of writing about whether or not university is a good return on investment. I'm not going to weigh in on whether it is or it isn't. I have one in university, but the reality is, I do think that there is a renewed interest in manufacturing, whether it is through university, engineering, or what have you, or trades. The one thing I would also comment for your listeners is, folks going through trade schools right now, they are in high demand, whether it's electricians, whether frankly it's plumbers or anything that you want to have done around your house or your facility. But there are many pathways into manufacturing, and there's just a huge demand for it. And I think that part of that, Jeremy, is because we've just had a drought
Yeah.
of really the best talent, motivated workers, people who want to come and work, and those people I mentioned earlier that are curious, because everyone wanted to go to Silicon Valley and join, a Facebook or a Google. But I'm here to tell you, and I live it every day, we have as much cool technology, whether it's 3D printing, applying AI to programming. We have as much cool technology for somebody who wants to come and geek out with us on that stuff as anybody else. And I'm speaking to the industry, certainly Fathom as well. And the barriers, um, I don't think that there's a lot. I think that, depending on where you want to step foot into, either a facility, a factory, design, engineering, entry level roles out of that 600,000 probably represents the majority of it. And, I've spent my career in it. I've met a lot of great people, and I think it is just a wonderful place to once again grow a career.
Yeah. To follow up with that, that was something that I wasn't necessarily thinking about when I was in school and college or a teenager. I was before I was in college, I was thinking a lot about music and sports and maybe entertainment. And I actually ended up interning for a musician during my time studying marketing at Ohio State University. But then I moved into manufacturing, and I've found it to be really interesting. It's something tangible. In my day job at Caster Connection, we actually sell product that helps people as well. So that's something that I can feel really good about. And I've discovered that marketing product maybe 15 years ago that people would consider a commodity actually is something that you can add a lot of flair to and a lot of personality to that I just would have never thought about 20 years ago.
No, I think that you've just hit on a really important point, Jeremy. I mean, there's not a lot of visibility for people in high school, college, or the trades is a little bit different because you're actually getting in and understanding how to do welding or electricity. But I mean, the thing about it is when I got into this industry a long time ago, you saw a lot of car people, like somebody who wants to go out and work on their car and were mechanically inclined. Cars today, not a lot of folks work on the current generation of them. But what I can tell you is, the reward that many of our team members openly talk about and what they get really excited about is when they see the products that we're working on with our customers go into a robot, to go into a healthcare supply chain, and then they start to really connect with, oh my gosh, we're doing diagnostic or MRI machines, and then they go to a hospital and they look around like, we had a hand in this. And I think the one that's probably most dramatic that people don't connect is you look up and you see launch vehicles, you see some of the things that, some of the new space companies are doing, and that's manufacturing. And it is super exciting for our teams to talk to the people producing those things. And so once again, I think it is an amazing time to usher in the best and the brightest, whether they're in university or in high school, because there's just so much cool stuff to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's something that we talk about quite a bit too in my day to day. Related to that, on a personal note, what motivates you as a leader in this space, and what do you hope your clients and teammates take away from working with Fathom Digital Manufacturing?
Well, like I already mentioned, I'm a kind of a manufacturing nerd, so I'm just in my element every day that I get to participate in this industry. I think what I find most fascinating, and it then leads into where I think Fathom fits in this whole equation, is um, every day we get to look at the needs of people designing really cool products. And we also have a view to companies that are bringing new manufacturing technologies. The one that's just most prevalent right now is 3D printing and all the offshoots of that. And we get to sit at the intersection of, hey, cool product. How do you make it? How can you make it better? How can you make it faster, cheaper, so more people can afford it? And that intersection, I have to tell you, I mentioned the folks out on our machines, that they love what they do. That's where they sit. And so my job is a fun one every day because I just get to try to clear out roadblocks to allow them to solve those problems and get those people together. And then, so if I think about the value that creates for our customers is one, we like to get involved really early on to, in some cases, introduce some of those new technologies to our customers or say, hey, maybe you haven't thought about how better to use differing technologies. And so we just have this rich palette of colors to help them paint their manufacturing picture. And, I think that's really valuable for a lot of people. As I mentioned earlier, you can go get parts from from all sorts of different places. We're not a parts provider, we're a solution provider. And I get out of bed every day pretty excited to go and figure out how to do that.
That's great. That's fantastic. And yeah, I appreciate your enthusiasm for manufacturing. It's great to hear, and hopefully it's inspiring to people listening, maybe that aren't in manufacturing yet, to get involved and consider it as a career. And also hopefully some people maybe that weren't aware that solutions like Fathoms are out there to give you a call. Wrapping up with that, for listeners who do want to learn more about Fathom Digital Manufacturing or explore working with you, what's the best way to get in touch, Rush?
Would love for folks to come visit our website. Our marketing team has done an outstanding job of speaking to much of what we've just discussed. And our website is Fathom MFG for manufacturing. So fathommfg.com. We're also really active on social, so LinkedIn. So if you want to come see what the latest and greatest is, we just recently had an open house, and the team did a great job of sharing what that looked like. And likewise, if you want to connect with me directly, you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Rush. It's really been a pleasure speaking with you today. It's been eye-opening for me with a sector of manufacturing that honestly I haven't been as familiar with. Maybe we can catch up again down the road. But otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope all of our listeners enjoyed this episode of the Industrial Lens podcast.
Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciated the time.
Thank you.